Good day. Happy Saturday. Welcome to another episode of Saturday Morning Storytime with Kevin and Ty. Today we're going to read to you How to Win Friends and Influence People. The Only Book You Need to Lead You to Success by Dale Carnegie. So I'm just going to dive in this morning. There's one section under the chapter How to Win People to Your Way of Thinking. So in an article in Bits and Pieces, some suggestions are made on how to keep a disagreement from becoming an argument. And I'm specifically sharing this part of the book to you because I think now more than ever, we are, or a lot of us are, taking the time and swimming in the discomfort of engaging in difficult conversations and dialogue with other people, our friends and family, about what's going on, what's been revealed in America right now. We live in a systemic racist system. It's pretty shitty in the US. It exists in Canada. We live in a history of white supremacy. And that's the story. So I'm sharing this part because Dale Carnegie offers his point of view of how to engage in conversations and to navigate disagreements from it blowing up to a heated argument where it is unbeneficial for both parties. And I think his definition of argument is kind of reacting and exploding in, anger and rage and not using that productively. So you're not hearing the other side, you're shutting down, and you are temper tantruming like you possibly likely did when you were 4 years old. You shut down to the world, to other people, and you shut down to the core of your being. So, welcome the disagreement. Remember the slogan, when two partners always agree, one of them is not necessary. If there is some point you haven't thought about, be thankful it is brought to your attention. Perhaps the disagreement is your opportunity to be corrected before you make a serious mistake. Distrust your first instinctive impression. Our first natural reaction in a disagreeable situation is to be defensive. So if I'm talking with Ty, hey Ty, how's it going? I've been thinking that you kind of smell funny. What? You think I smell funny? I hate you. You're a Chinese bastard. That's exaggerated, but our instinctive first reaction, or I like to call it first thought wrong, take a second to just pause and see what comes after the first gut impression, what comes after the first thought, and move from there. So our first natural reaction in a disagreeable situation is to be defensive. Be careful, keep calm, and watch out for your first reaction. It may be you at your worst, not your best. So control your temper. Remember, you can measure the size of a person by what makes him or her angry. And I want to also add, you can measure the size of a person by how quickly he or she or they jump to conclusion and act out as opposed to respond and to listen. So the next one is listen first. Give your opponents a chance to talk. Let them finish. Do not resist, defend, or debate. This only raises barriers. Try to build bridges of understanding. Don't build higher barriers of misunderstanding. Building a wall, dehumanizing the other party, name calling, that is not helpful. That's just setting up more barriers. Be honest. Look for areas where you can admit error and say so. Apologize for your mistakes. It will help disarm your opponents and reduce defensiveness. Promise to think over your opponent's ideas and study them carefully and genuinely mean it. Your opponents may be right. It is a lot easier at this stage to agree to think about their points than to move rapidly ahead and find yourself in a position when your opponents can say, "We tried to tell you, but you wouldn't listen." So thank your opponents sincerely for their interest. Anyone who takes the time to disagree with you is interested in the same things you are. We all want to be happy. None of us want to suffer. And deep down inside, we want our home, our planet, our world to be peaceful. Think of them as people who really want to help you, and you may turn your opponents into friends. Postponed action to give both sides time to think through the problem. Suggest that a new meeting be held later that day or next day when all the facts may be brought to bear. In preparation for this meeting, ask yourself some hard questions. Could my opponents be right? Partly right? Is there truth or merit in their position or argument? Is my reaction one that will relieve the problem, or will it just relieve any frustration? Will my reaction drive my opponents further away or draw them closer to me? Will my reaction elevate the estimation good people have of me? Will I win or will I lose? What price will I have to pay if I win? If I am quiet about it, will the disagreement blow over? Is this difficult situation an opportunity for me? Opera tenor Jan Pierce, after he was married nearly 50 years ago, once said, "My wife and I made a pact a long time ago, and we've kept it no matter how angry we've grown of each other. When one yells, the other should listen, because when two people yell, there is no communication, just noise and bad vibrations and riots." So this principle of this chapter is the only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. So Ty and I stand strongly with Dan's way of navigating disagreements and engaging in difficult conversations and dialogue to avoid volatile, violent arguments. And I just want to read another part of the book where, when I read it, I started reading this book before George Floyd's murder and before I started to watch documentaries and learn a bit more about the history, what's going on. And it really made me think of this part of the book. So you can imagine taking in the context of where we are today, or I guess if you've been reading up, having conversations, just looking at social media, hearing what's going on and the stories told by our Black brothers and sisters. When I read this, think of that context, okay? So this little part of the book, what's under the chapter, Fundamental Techniques in Handling People. So this little part in the book, it's called Father Forgets by W. Livingston Larned. Listen, son, I am saying this as you lie asleep, one little paw crumpled under your cheek, and the blonde curls stickily wet on your damp forehead. I have stolen into your room alone. Just a few minutes ago, as I sat reading my paper in the library, a stifling wave of remorse swept over me. Guiltily, I came to your bedside. There are things I was thinking, son. I had been cross to you. I scolded you as you were dressing for school because you gave your face merely a dab with a towel. I took you to task for not cleaning your shoes. I called out angrily when you threw some of your things on the floor. At breakfast, I found fault too. You spilled things. You gulped down your food. You put your elbows on the table. You spread butter too thick on your bread. And as you started off to play and I made for my train, you turned and waved a hand and called, "Goodbye, Daddy." And I frowned, and I said in reply, "Hold your shoulders back." Then it began all over again in the late afternoon. As I came up the road and I spied you down on your knees, playing marbles, there were holes in your stockings. I humiliated you before your boyfriends by marching you ahead of me to the house. Stockings were expensive, and if you had to buy them, you would be more careful. Imagine that, son, from a father. Do you remember later, when I was reading in the library, how you came in timidly with a sort of hurt look in your eyes? When I glanced up over my paper impatiently at the interruption, you hesitated at the door. "What is it you want?" I snapped. You said nothing, but it ran across in one tempestuous plunge, and threw your arms around my neck and kissed me, and your small arms tightened with an affection that God had set blooming in your heart, and which even neglect could not wither. And then you were gone, pattering up the stairs. Well, son, it was shortly afterwards that my paper slipped from my hands, and a terrible, sickening fear came over me. What habit has been doing me? The habit of finding fault, of reprimanding. This was my reward to you for being a boy. It was not that I did not love you. It was that I expected too much of youth. I was measuring you by the yardstick of my own years of my past. And there was so much that was good and fine and true in your character. The little heart of you was as big as the dawn itself over the wide hills. This was shown by your spontaneous impulse to rush in and kiss me good night. Nothing else matters tonight, son. I have come to your bedside in the darkness, and I have knelt there ashamed. It is a feeble atonement. I know you would not understand these things if I told them to you during your waking hours. But tomorrow I will be a real daddy. I will chum with you and suffer when you suffer and laugh when you laugh. I will bite my tongue when impatient words come. I will keep saying as if it were a ritual, he is nothing but a boy, a little boy. I am afraid I have visualized you as a man, and yet, as I see you now, son, crumpled and weary in your cot, I see that you are still a baby. Yesterday you were in your mother's arms and your head on her shoulder. I have asked too much. Too much. So instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out why they do what they do. Let's try to figure out why we do what we do. Let's try to figure out why we think what we think. Let's try to figure out what is real in here. Let's try to figure out what it means to be a human. Let's try to figure out what it means to think about what we think about. That's a lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism, and it breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness. To know all is to forgive all. As Dr. Johnson said, God himself, sir, does not propose to judge man until the end of his days. Why should you and I? Principle. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Thank you for listening. Ty and I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to us, to Dale Carnegie, and listen to what's going on. Listen to other people's stories other than, my story, Dale Carnegie's story. And most of all, ask yourself, what's your story up until then? And what story do you want to leave behind?